Welcome everyone to this session on global public and private partnership models for boosting local digital agriculture ecosystem building. We're very happy to have you all here with us today. I'm Marie-Agnès Jean. I'm an agriculture economist at the World Bank in the Global Engagement Unit in the Data-Driven and Digital Agriculture team. I'll be your facilitator today / moderator. Not really sure how to call myself today, but I will help the flow of the panel and the transition into the questions. I'm really happy to introduce this panel today, which I think is going to share some really interesting insights about innovative ways to fast track the development of local ecosystems. Because we know that building an ecosystem takes time. The scattered stakeholder landscape makes the scaling of innovation particularly difficult, and opportunities offered by digital technologies to unlock the potential for millions of farmers are now exploited when we know that digital technologies can just do so. And so the World Bank is working with global and local public and private partners to develop frameworks for cooperation to leverage knowledge and capacity at all scales to help countries leapfrog their way through this digital transformation of their agri-food system. So the objective of this session is to discuss these new approaches that can help unlock and fast track this digital transformation. So we have organized the panel in 3 sections. First, we have an introduction from Parmesh, the World Bank Global Lead for Data-Driven and Digital Agriculture, who will tell us about the new approaches the World Bank is developing to support the digital transformation in the World Bank client countries. Then, our 2 first panelists are bringing the perspective of 2 key stakeholders to support the development of local ecosystems, the government and the private sector with the investors and accelerators. And then in the second part, we will hear from, let's say, the practitioners who will tell us more specifically about the constraints they face and how new approaches they are developing are fast-tracking this digital transformation, and this all the way to farmers who are to benefit from this transformation. All panelists have about 6 minutes to share their thoughts about how innovative approaches are needed to unlock this ecosystem building, share the experience about such innovative approaches that they have adopted, and what they think can be the role of the donor community in particular to support these efforts, including the World Bank. So for the sake of time, I will only briefly introduce our panelists, but you have their full bios in the agenda of this session, and I'm sure, hopefully, this will spark some further conversations with them. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Parmesh for introductory remarks. Over to you, Parmesh.
Thanks, Marie-Agnès, and very glad to be here with a very illustrious panel here. I'm just going to lay down the context of what we are seeing right now in the context of our work in terms of developing ecosystems and platforms. So in terms of when we started working on the digital agenda, the conventional work was to fund some applications or some distinct set of activities and make some investments in either the hardware, which is the infrastructure, or make investments in some applications. And we found that when we made the investments, this evaporated and did not sustain. So we pivoted to what we call as now the ecosystem or the platform approach, where you invest in an ecosystem or a platform as opposed to investing in distinct applications or discrete set of activities. And so I think we believe very strongly that the changes in digital agriculture or digitally enabled innovations can only happen when we take an ecosystem and platform approach, which means that you have to take a more medium-term approach at least, and you have to take 5 to 7 year horizon in terms of building the ecosystem. And conventionally, when we do World Bank projects, they are 5 to 7 years, but the actual platform and investments and ecosystem investments are not made with that kind of horizon. So the second point I want to say is that we found that a lot of activities were taking a lot of time to sustain and scale up because there were foundational investments in data platforms were not done. So if you did not have data platforms in place, individual startups were taking a lot of time to access data, analyze data, and then develop products and services. So if you did not have the data foundation in place, which would mean weather data, which would mean crop data, which could mean commodity data, transaction data, and if this data was not available in a way that it was accessible, all the players were taking longer to reach some amount of maturity, scale, or viability. The second part was the whole innovation ecosystem, or what we call as basically the startup ecosystem itself. Now, startups also require all kind of support for some time in order to become viable over a period of time. And there is non-financial support, which is in terms of incubation and other things, but also the financial support, which is required over a period of time. And you require a kind of approach of investing in that platform, which is incubation and acceleration platform, to go with that. And finally, it is about the institutional innovation and building local capacity to really run this ecosystem. Because we found that a number of times when only the global players were involved or donors were involved in this process, the things would really disintegrate after the initial investments. So a lot of focus on creating institutional capacity within both the government as well as in the local private sector ecosystem was required, which meant that you had to work with a number of players at the local level. In Kenya, where we worked, it meant working with almost 45 counties, across the place. So you had to have many people who were the nodes of innovation, both in public and private sector, and to create these strategic kind of partnerships between the local governments and the innovators and create a more broad-based innovation ecosystem there. So to summarize, I would say that you require data platforms, you require a startup innovation ecosystem, incubation, acceleration, and then you require also the institutional innovations. So I would say the World Bank plays more a role of facilitator and a convener as opposed to the core investor. And we have many other people who are investing in the platform or the ecosystem. So if you invest a platform in the ecosystem, then many people get vested in that. The local, research organizations get vested in that. The local, startups get vested in that. But what I feel very strongly is that we can't start from scratch. So there's a lot of data available in global platforms, weather data. NASA has got data, others have data. That data needs to be harvested in order to reduce the turnaround time to be able to get these systems matured, basically. Otherwise, if you invest country by country, then you will not leapfrog the lot of advancements which are happening in global data which are there. So I think the case is clearly to build a platform and ecosystem and let global players, national players, the regional players, and local players to work together and co-produce a kind of products and services in the ecosystem. So I think we will hear from everyone. We have very good examples here with a lot of partners with whom we are working or likely to work, and hear from how they are working on developing local ecosystems for innovation and digital agriculture. Over to you, Mary Agnes.
Thank you. I have to ask the host to unmute me. Sorry, I'm a bit slow with this. Thanks, Parmesh, for this introductory remarks and for sharing what we hear by an ecosystem approach with these different pillars that you have shared. And so now start with our sections on key stakeholders. Let me give the floor to Dr. Mandefro Ngusi, Chief Executive Officer from the Ethiopia Agriculture Transformation Agency, ATA, who will tell us about these institutional innovation promise that you were mentioning, these needs for these institutional innovations to support this transformation, and the approach that is adopted in Ethiopia with consolidating partnerships around a coordinated roadmap for this digital transformation. Over to you, Dr. Mondefro.
Thank you so much, Mare. Thank you, Amish, for setting the scene. I'm very pleased to be among these known panelists. So, digital agriculture and working together, I think, are not an option now. I think it's a must to do. So, how we are attracted toward this, and what is our desire, and what supporters do we need from development partners as well as from private sector who are interested in investing in the country. So, sorry, I couldn't initiate my video because of the bandwidth of the internet that I'm using, Mare. So, is that okay?
Yes, no worries, no worries. We're happy to hear you.
Thank you. So, Ethiopia planned a very ambitious goals and targets in terms of attaining food security and nutrition security, boosting export in both volume and value, as well as providing sufficient raw materials for the booming agro-industry in the country. So these ambitious targets like doubling crop and livestock yield in terms of volume as well requires a shift and a reform in terms of business processes, policies and practices, organizational setups and mindset of key actors. Such significant reforms require disruptive digital technologies as a driver of agricultural transformation. So what are we doing right now, and what do we have ICT-based innovations, and how is the readiness of Ethiopia to transform the current services towards a digital system? So Ethiopia is running 8028 Farmers Hotline. This is a digital platform that has IVR and SMS with 4 basic elements. It has call service, broadcasting, SMS and IVR, help desk, and an interactive survey. So this platform has about 5.5 million farmers registered as callers, and they call mainly to seek agronomic practices, advices in that area, advices in the pest management. So for the last 4 years, over 55 million calls were registered for agronomic and crop protection related advisory services. And the platform provided 4.5 million responses and 1 million SMS sent to users. 12,000 questions were addressed by experts in the area, and about 682,000 survey results were broadcasted, and about 49,000 SMS in the form of early warning system for wheat rust management was also broadcasted. And similarly, we have 6077 customer hotline, which is very much related to market information system. We also have a collaboration work between an Indian private sector and Ethiopian ATA on Crop In. This is meant for profiling farmers' registration. We register farmers in the agricultural commercialization cluster because we want to take these farmers from one level to the next level until they reach a company level investors. We also run an e-based input voucher system for aggregating demands as well as marketing fertilizer. And this has shortened the lengthy process and paper-based processes. So the 4 ICT-based solutions are value chain attached. And now we have a desire to shift from value chain-based ecosystem to ecosystem-based digital solutions. So what we are trying right now is digitizing existing products and services by engaging multiple actors. As part of this digitization process, the Ministry of Agriculture invited about 15 organizations that do have projects associated with ICT for agriculture. And the objective of that meeting was mapping existing digital platforms, products, and services. At the end of this joint meeting, the participants agreed to develop a roadmap that all these actors plus other actors can contribute towards implementation of digital agricultural extension and advisory services. And currently the roadmap is being implemented. In terms of partners, we are partnering with Digital Green, IRI, Columbia University, Cement, FAO, Rockefeller, and we are seeking new partners, especially in the area where we collected a lot of information related to soil mapping and a lot of information related to shallow groundwater. That is an area where we would like World Bank to connect us with relevant institutions. And with this kind of conferences, we would like to get partners whom we work with. We want to make use of the information that we collected, the data we collected, and we want others also to make use of this information. So we revised our policies, and our development partners are expected to help us in establishing a dynamic digital ecosystem. And there is one challenge, capacity building on the government side has at least something. On the private side, there is something, but an interface between a private sector and the government where, a blended finance could be a means for digital solution is an area of investment by, especially like a trust fund in the bank. So we in the sector, in the agriculture sector, think that digital ecosystem transformation is a driver of digital transformation, which in turn is a driver for agricultural transformation that Ethiopia is targeting at. So with that, I would get back to you, Mare, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mandefro. That was really, really interesting insights and thoughts about how we could further help you and indeed the better use of data that you already have. And I'm sure a lot of potential partners will hear you today and maybe including in our panel. So I know 6 minutes is not enough to share all this, but I think you already made quite a lot of really interesting points. I would like to introduce now Danny O'Brien from SDG Ventures Thrive. He's managing director of the global program, and he's going to tell us about more the private sector role into supporting this acceleration and also about the constraints they face in doing so and what would be needed to sort of ignite the ecosystem spark. So Danny, over to you.
Thank you, Maria Agnes. Hopefully you can hear me, everyone, and good morning. Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here alongside a great panel. Just to introduce ourselves briefly, we're an innovation and investment platform based in Silicon Valley. We invest in agri-food tech at the early stages, so investing in startups from all over the world, not just the US. We've invested in about 16 countries to date. So we have a good understanding of various ecosystems around the world, some more advanced than others. We've done a number of global challenges to find startups in specific regions, including Africa, Latin America, etc., and learned a lot about those ecosystems that are emerging throughout that process. And it really kickstarted our knowledge about some of these emerging ecosystems. I guess, for us as a private sector investor, I'm coming at this from a different point of view to some of the panelists today of investing in startups. And we see startups as the future of really helping this digital transformation. They're the ones who are going to make the difference, and farmers are going to adopt many of these solutions on farms. So the role really of the donor community, the public sector, is to create the conditions conducive to allow these startups to start and scale wherever their ecosystem might be, really. And I feel like there's a number of, there's kind of three things that stick out in my mind when we think about investment in data, like Parmesh was talking about, and investing in an ecosystem. There's kind of three things that come to my mind of how this can help spur the ecosystem. One is that data that can be collected can empower a next generation of startups. And we've seen this with new platforms that have come out in the past in more emerging markets. That data that becomes available then enables people to build on top of that. So that can really, I think by investing in an ecosystem, pulling this data together can really empower the next generation of startups in many countries in Africa, for example, where we're seeing this, a lack of data on the ground. And we need more startups at the early stages, especially in Africa, where we're doing some work on building various ecosystems across the continent. There's a lack of deal flow that we see as investable as international investors. And I think that is where the focus needs to be, is on empowering them. The second point then from my mind is attracting international investors or private sector investors and helping de-risk their investments. So an ecosystem can really help do this by, in essence, more data, more partners equals more social proof that this company is who they say they are, that the opportunity is as big as it can be, that they've validated the market need. There's just a lot more ways that you can validate this company, and that can hold back investment. We're seeing, I think in Africa in particular, a lot of people understand the opportunities that exist across the continent in many countries. They understand that it's the future, but they're put off by the complexities, the lack of knowledge, and the more public, the more collaboration we have on the ground, the more these investors will be enticed to come in and invest in some of these companies. And I think we need to kind of de-risk things for them by helping out on due diligence. And I think the end goal of this is having a strong indigenous private sector investment community as well, beyond donor capital, because private capital is a much higher signal to international investors, and they will follow as well. And we've seen this in other markets like India, where Omnivore have done a great job, SP Ventures in Brazil, for example. That strong indigenous capital like that has really kickstarted the ecosystem. And then the third thought on my mind around this is the opportunity to convene financing for farmers on the ground to adopt some of these technologies. So investment in startups and in digital is important, but really it's farmers and end users, growers, people in the agri-food value chain who need to adopt this technology if we're really going to make a difference for economic growth, but also driving impact as well around climate. And many farmers operate in very thin margins, no matter where they are in the world, and especially the last 6 months, a year has been very challenging with the rise in commodity prices, the rise in energy prices now. So farmers are compressed on margins, and they don't have the wherewithal to adopt all these technologies. So there needs to be financing in place to help them adopt these on farms. And I think climate is a huge driver for this as well, where again, the last year, 18 months, I feel like the world has woken up a bit more to climate change and really wants to do action now rather than greenwashing and talk. And this is an opportunity to drive climate mitigation by adopting some of these practices in emerging markets as well. So they're the three things that are on my mind when it comes to ecosystem building, the importance of it. This is something we're doing in many markets. We've done this in the US over 10 years now. We've worked with the government there, the USDA. We're working with the government of Canada and Alberta at the moment to build an ecosystem there. And we're doing this with local partners in other markets who know the market better than we do, but we see ourselves and the international community as important players to drive this as well, because capital is becoming more globalized and more fluid, and in theory can invest invest in most places. So we really try to empower that. And just to kind of maybe close is having the farmers at the heart of this as well, and because they're the end users of this, and always thinking about what value we're bringing to the farmers, because they're the ones who are going to adopt much of this technology when we talk about agriculture. So I don't want to go over my 6 minutes and keep things on track. So maybe I'll stop there, Maria-Agnes, and can come back to anything with questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danny. We'll have an opportunity to come back to all of you afterwards. So thanks for very, very interesting, great insights. I very much like the fact that you mentioned how the local ecosystem building is a way to de-risk more generally, and your focus on farmers, because indeed, if farmers can't afford these services, then we're not going to go anywhere, whatever happens. So the end users are always to be kept in mind, of course, but we realize that sometimes we forget about it, unfortunately, in some approaches. So thanks for that. Now I would like to move on to the second part, the last part of our panel sort of presentation, with starting with Inbal Becker-Reshev, director in NASA Harvest, who is going to tell us about her experience and how new approaches can allow to make better use of data for the creation of solutions and the delivery of services. So Inbal, over to you.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much. Excuse me, Marie, and yes, and it's a real honor to be here and to participate on this panel. As Maria said, I'm the director of NASA Harvest, and NASA Harvest is NASA's program in food security and agriculture, and we're very much focused on advancing the use and the uptake of satellite data for informing agricultural decisions, really across the agricultural sector. And we have a large focus also on smallholder farmers. And I think one of the big gaps that we see is in these foundational data sets, especially within smallholder systems. And I think we've heard in different terms on this, the two panelists before, where there are a lot of advances right now. A lot of the research has advanced in terms of being able to create these data sets that really should be in public good data sets, and in a sense, if you will, in a pre-competitive space, and which at the moment, a lot of these kinds of data are very much still sitting inside competitive space. And so, and I think if we're able to identify these and look at modalities, whether they're through innovative public-private partnerships, they can help to play a real critical role in developing this and kickstarting this ecosystem that we've been hearing about earlier today, and can enable a lot of different key services and different key policies. I think there are a lot of data that are fundamental across a lot of different applications. And so if, for example, a key piece of information is identifying where croplands are, and in particular, where different crop types are being grown, and being able to create this kind of data within the season as well as at the end of a season. And so, and this is a place that satellite data are playing a critical role, where the research and that transition from research into operation is really moving very quickly. In terms of our capabilities to map croplands at national scales, at regional scales. And at the moment, we're seeing that a lot of these kinds of data are still in a competitive space. And so a lot of different companies and organizations are creating and developing these data sets. But if these were a public good data set and really viewed as a pre-competitive space, there would be a lot more, these could really help to kickstart and not have to have a lot of different groups and organizations investing in remote sensing, in the capability to develop these models, and crucially, the ground data that's really needed in order to pair satellite data with ground observations to create these. And if I give this use case of crop type maps, they have a lot of value for food balance sheets, for looking at statistics, for early warning, for being able to monitor as we're going through the season how and what crop conditions are like. They can also have important applications for looking at climate adaptation and strategies and programs, are also used within insurance space, within loan and credit. So really, in that sense, a foundational data set. And I think if we look at examples where where these kinds of data are available, are reliably available. So we know that a specific Ministry of Agriculture is going to put these out. We know when they're going to come out, that they're going to be validated. A lot of both public, private sector, international humanitarian organizations can build on top of that. And I think there's still a big gap that can be filled within this. And so I think in terms of a World Bank role and other donors is really to help to de-risk this, right? So to look at, can we do this? Can we demonstrate the value of this? Can we look at who are the stakeholders that could be using these? How do we develop these? And I think thinking on the long term, of course, and then being, if you're able to demonstrate that, then you transition these kinds of capabilities. Oftentimes, I think they do belong in government organizations and in ministries of agriculture, or perhaps thinking about these in more creative public-private spaces. And so I think within this, I think a major challenge is the ground data. I think we hear this over and over again. I think any product that we develop, we need to have the data to train these kinds of products and models, and also really crucially to be able to validate these, right? So it's not enough to have a great map of where croplands are if you don't know the accuracy of that model or the accuracy of that product. And so I think here again, there's so many different partners, organizations that are collecting a lot of data, extremely valuable data. But there are different issues with sharing that. One is just the coordination actually of these, but also, of course, there's a lot of issues with privacy. And I think here again, there are different creative solutions that can come in that are being explored. One could imagine, and we've been in some discussions, and I know that the World Bank is in different discussions around these kinds of approaches, where you could have a secure system where you could imagine insurance companies, for example, right? That's a group that's collecting a lot of data, or extension services, could put these into a secure system where none of the partners would actually be able to see that ground data, but that data would be able to train and validate these kinds of satellite-driven products. And so therefore, if you have better data, if you have more data, you could create better products that everybody benefits from. Again, very much seeing this as the foundational layer for building on top of that the competitive space, rather than seeing that as part of the competitive space. And if I give an example, we looked at, for example, 7 different cropland products over Kenya and found a humongous amount of disagreement between them. And there are a lot more than just the 7 that we looked at. And so imagine how much effort's going into creating these, into the different ground data that's being collected to create this. Whereas if instead we would come together and find a coordinated way for doing these and bringing that data together, 1, the quality of those products would go up, and 2, there'd be a lot more access to these kinds of data sets. So I think we've been in some early discussions with an insurance use case around this, and looking at if different companies would be willing to try to share this kind of data, and bringing in government as well. And I think the government has a very important role to play within this, and looking at, can we come up with a mechanism where we could prototype such an approach where everybody sees and has mutual benefit for everybody, that again, then these products can be built on top of. So I think it's extremely important, as we heard from the previous speakers, and having coordination of efforts. There's so many different activities going on, and really making sure that we're able to find partnerships and able to leave each other's effort. And really, really importantly, that these are always going to be stakeholder, community driven, and in particular at the local scale. I think there's a lot of research going on, but if the research is not connected to the stakeholders, if it's driven by the research rather than driven by the stakeholders, it's never going to have the impact that has potential for. So I think on the remote sensing side, again, we've seen tremendous advances in these technologies and our capabilities in the last several years, both in terms of the satellite data, also in terms of the machine learning algorithms, and really importantly, on cloud computing spaces, which means that this is much more available to be able to produce and process these large amounts of data. And a lot of advances in the research community again. So I think coming back to this, I think there's a tremendous potential at the moment, and really thinking about how do we create these public good data sets? How do we look at creative public-private partnerships for ultimately develop these foundational data sets? And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inba. It's really fascinating presentation. A lot that's been said in these few minutes. And as you said, the World Bank is indeed discussing these potential architecture with some stakeholders. Interestingly, I think there's a momentum. It feels like there's an increasing realization that the data ecosystem stakeholders that we need to cooperate around data to focus energy on and resources and actually competition at the right level, which is the creation of these services, right? So on top of these data, and let's not compete on holding the data, but actually make it these foundational elements. So thanks a lot for providing examples about it. I think that maybe there will be some more conversation with Dr. Mondefro about what to do with his own data in Ethiopia further on. Now moving on to my colleague Jihai Kim, who is a key actor at the World Bank for developing these new approaches for supporting the scaling up of local startups. And she has tested these new approaches in Kenya and now in Uganda. She's unfortunately not with us now because the time was not really working for her for this session, but she recorded a video that we're going to pass now. So Vivek, hopefully you were able to load the video and I give the floor to Jihai.
Hello, everyone. I am Jihai Kim. I'm a senior agriculture economist at the World Bank, and I specialize in digital agriculture. I regret to join you through recorded video. I would be happy to keep engaging with the fellow panels and audiences beyond this forum, offline and online. So I'm sure by now, Pramesh has already shared the global perspective of the World Bank engagement in creating the digital agriculture ecosystems. Responding to that bigger picture, I'll be sharing with you how we are fast forwarding the local digital agriculture ecosystem in Uganda and Kenya. So why Uganda and why Kenya? This decision was informed by partly by the findings of our study titled Scaling Up Disruptive Agriculture Technologies in Africa, and partly from the vantage point of a development partner supporting a few agriculture projects in Kenya and Uganda. So our study found that in Uganda and Kenya, large proportion of promising agri-tech startups, with Kenya being the hub in East Africa. And in both countries, we have a large portfolio of World Bank financed projects. And our Scaling Up Disruptive Agriculture Technology report identified several promising local agri-tech startups that have solutions customizable to our agriculture projects and to our beneficiaries. And we thought World Bank financed agriculture investment projects offer a competitive marketplace for these local agri-tech startups if they can become our vendor. So with this background, our team within the World Bank hosted the first Disruptive Agriculture Technology Innovation Challenge competition in partnership with the Uganda government, the Kenyan government first, through their agriculture ministry. And through this event, we identified more than 50 agri-tech startups who participated in the competition process and selected 14 Kenyan-based agri-tech startups as winners. These startups were then matched to county governments in Kenya, whose challenges matched the solutions provided through these startups. But this matching process was very long, and it took sweet time for everyone to have a contractual relationship. And Kuza, for example, was one of the DATs that we identified in Kenya and can share more about the experience. So applying the lessons from Kenya, we repeated the process in Uganda, but this time we made sure every process responds to the procurement rules and processes of the World Bank and also the government in Uganda. In this competition event in Uganda, we have chosen 4 local startups, and they are all now vendors of the project that is ongoing in Uganda called Agriculture Cluster Development Project, or ACDP. And to give you an example, Java Engineering, which is a soil fertility management startup, came out as the winner, and now they provide soil fertility management solutions for our beneficiary farmers in Uganda. As a vendor for the ACDP project, Java is now operational in 57 districts covered by the World Bank project. It is working with 7,200 farmers in 720 sub-counties covered by the project. And I assure you, this is a scale that would have took Java years to achieve had it not been the ACDP. Becoming a vendor for the ACDP meant that Java expanded exponentially. It's evident that they tripled the number of their core staff, and they built their presence in all the corners of strategic counties in Uganda. What is even more exciting is that Java's story is not singular. The DATs, or the local agri-tech startups contracted under the ACDP, have all achieved the scale, and they are put on the acceleration path through partnering with us. So as I shared so far, we have shown the proof of concept of working with local agri-tech startups as one important ecosystem enabler. Looking back, we think it really started from recognizing local agri-tech startups and their presence and their potentials. And throughout this journey, we have crystallized our role as an ecosystem enabler, and we have demonstrated how to identify them through study like disruptive agriculture technology study, and our methodologies are open to public. And we have also demonstrated how to select them through open competition. Again, our processes and methodologies are open to public. And we have also demonstrated how to accelerate the local agri-tech startups through contracting them in our investment projects. We're in no way claiming that this is the best model. And we also recognize that this model pertains to our unique position as a financing development partner. However, we are convinced and confident that we'll be able to replicate this success at a bigger scale and faster if we partner with other development partners, joining as another ecosystem enabler in the platform. So let's keep in touch, and let's fast track together the digital agriculture ecosystem for local agri-tech startups and entrepreneurs, and most of all, smallholder farmers in Africa. Thank you.
Well, many thanks to Jihei for sharing her experience in Kenya and Uganda on how adopting innovative approaches is allowing the World Bank to work with local startups and help them scale. But actually, to further discuss this approach, we have our panelist, Sriram Bharatham, who is the founder and chief mentor of one of the startups which has participated in the program in Kenya, Kuza One. He's got 2.5 decades of digital innovation experience, thought leadership, and architecting initiatives at government scale to transform the lives of 6 million people across Africa and South Asia. And he's going to share with us some of his experiences with the Kenya Innovation Challenge. Sri, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary Agnes. It's such an honor to be here on this panel. I would like to take an approach as a social entrepreneur and an innovator. While the global public good initiatives are working hard to align to create shared infrastructure like the previous panelists have shared, I personally believe it's equally important to have a landing partner in the form of a human user interface at the last mile who can help achieve 3 strategic goals. Number 1, actualize these global efforts by ground truthing, like the way Inbal spoke about it. Extremely important to do a ground truthing and a strong feedback loops so that the systems can improvise. Second, create reach and scale for the agtech innovators, the startups, and also the traditional market actors locally. And thirdly, provide personalized services to the farmers and service providers. And this is a key point Danny was speaking about. Farmer is at the center of all the initiatives that we are doing. So just wanted to give a Kenyan context from the ground level. An average Kenyan farmer is 63-year-old, while an average Kenyan is 19 years. There's a massive intergenerational crisis going on, and youth are not interested in pursuing agriculture for their livelihoods. There's a very well articulated agriculture sector transformation growth strategy at a country level, but the public sector extension network is weak. On an average, one public sector extension worker is serving 5,000 farmers versus a recommended ratio by FAO of 1 to 400. And majority of these public extension workers are close to their retirement, and no more onboarding is happening there. That's a key point to be kept in mind. Number three, private sector service providers are finding it expensive and very hard to reach and serve the smallholder farmers who are all over and have little or no motivation to invest further. Now, this is where our collaboration, and thanks to the opportunity that we got, like Jihe spoke about, the Disruptive Agriculture Technology Initiative in Kenya, which was announced in 2019, and KUZA is one of the cohorts of innovators, as part of the 1 million farmer platform. And I believe this is a major value add that the World Bank has done as an innovator. And as a cohort representative, I can speak on behalf of everyone that we all got access to existing set of farmers at zero cost. The cost of acquisition of farmers was zero because the World Bank investments already went into grouping them into small groups, common interest groups, and also into producer groups. So mapped across priority value chains. Second, we also received a grant support to initially validate and pilot this within select counties so that we can see the technologies and the initiatives are working. And thirdly, most importantly, because of the convening power of the World Bank, we also had an opportunity to bundle and scale with other innovators. And I think that's where we got a great opportunity. At KUZA, we are actually creating opportunities for youth and women to learn, connect, and grow. And what we are doing in agriculture is we are identifying enterprising rural youth from the communities. Two, we launch them as agripreneurs, agriculture entrepreneurs, by incubating them through something called READY, Rural Entrepreneur Development Incubators. We equip them with portable digital kits with curated agronomy content in micro-learning video format, and also digital tools for extension services at the last mile. And fourthly, these agripreneurs provide bundled services to a cohort of 200 farmers. These are information, advisory, inputs, market, credit, all the facilitation is done by them. And agripreneurs are bootstrapped with the support from the developmental grants, but they sustain by earning commissions from the sale of these products and services. In under 3 years, working closely within the ecosystem partners, one being the World Bank, second being the county governments, third being UN World Food Program, and other partners like Heifer International, Catholic Relief Services, we have scaled our presence in Kenya from 3 counties in 2019 to 29 counties, currently having 600 agripreneurs serving 120,000 farmers. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we are seeing a growing demand from across the country. If I want to summarize, I would like to summarize this in 5 key learnings. Number 1, we realize that it is extremely important to get the buy-in from the local government. For us to achieve scale, for me, scale is government scale. It takes time and patience and perseverance, but once one government embraces, others follow suit. And this is speaking from my own experience. Number 2, trust is the currency on which we are operating. Trust with the farmers, trust with the community, and trust with the partners. And Inbal, you spoke about the way it's important to bring all of the private sector and other partners together. Trust is an important piece, and we got to put effort to bring people together. Bundling of information, products, and services, both crops and livestock, is extremely important to reduce the farmer fatigue and also create sustainable last mile agripreneur network. It would serve, it's a win-win-win proposition for everyone. Continuity and community level interaction is extremely important. Continuity at a community level. Developmental programs have a start and an end time. The crowding in of developmental resources towards creating an ecosystem model with clear sustainable strategy right in the concept stage would actually go a long way, because once the partner leaves, a program ends, the whole thing collapses. So it is extremely important there. And innovative business models. And there are so many of them already coming up. Again, from our own experience, we're seeing there's an opportunity for us to create agriculture as a service. Like software as a service, agriculture as a service model is very, very strongly emerging. And we are seeing different entrepreneurs all go through same incubation, but there are different specializations that are emerging. Some are becoming input entrepreneurs, some are becoming mechanization services providers, some are becoming spraying, some are doing aggregation. So to summarize, I personally believe it takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes an ecosystem to raise a startup and make things happen. Thank you so much, Maria Agnes.
Thank you very much, Sri, for this intervention. I think that was really a great complementary intervention for this panel. So we're reaching the end of the panel. We don't have that much time left, and we have a few questions, but not so many from the audience. So please feel free to send us some questions. I just wanted to raise a few points and then give you, the panel, the opportunity to maybe come back to add a few points according to what you've just heard from the different panelists here. But some points I would like to highlight is what I hear is, of course, the real importance of the government and support from the government, the sustainability, and particularly for the sustainability element, but also the fact that we need to be innovative in our approaches. We know that there are a lot of issues in terms of data privacy and confidentiality that can really have prevented until now to make the best use of data. We know that there's the issue of data literacy, connectivity, but we're realizing with the example of what Sri is talking about or Inbal is talking about, that there are solutions, and we need to maybe think outside the box again even more to really see how these solutions can come in, and these new business models that we can create to really support the access, the development of these digital services and their access to farmers. So I would like to now know if whether one of the panelists maybe would like to add a few points before we go to the Q&A from the audience. Please, I don't know if I can see any raised hands, but take the floor. Don't hesitate. I'm sure if you can unmute yourself though at this stage, hoping you can, or send me a message.
I can jump in just briefly. I'd just like to underline that point about the innovative business models. We see that as being hugely important with smallholder farmers, where there isn't, which I touched on earlier, there isn't a lot of margin there to invest in these new technologies. Taking a more ecosystem approach of having a solution that's offered to multiple smallholder farmers rather than one farmer adopting that one solution for themselves. I think that's really important, which isn't the case in other markets, but especially for a lot of African markets, that microtransaction kind of way of doing business is really important. And we've seen some very successful companies scale on that business model. So I think that's a really interesting point, and excited to see what else can be out there as well. I would just reiterate the point from my end of, I think what's needed across Africa is a few small wins as well, to get some momentum going, and that will, once you get that flywheel going, it'll start spinning a lot quicker. And I think once we have some breakout successes with companies who've done really well, managed to scale across multiple countries, like we've seen in fintech, for example, there's a lot more unicorns in that space. Then that'll create more FOMO from people who want to get into the ecosystem. But we've got to start small and keep in mind the end goal. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Danny. Anyone else would like to raise a few more points according to what other panelists have been sharing? Maybe Dr. Mendefro, relating to what Inbal was saying about the data ecosystem and your call for better using your own data, if you have a few more thoughts maybe on this.
Thank you, Mari. I would like to begin from the statement by Inbal talking about research is not well connected with extension and market. That's very true, and we have that challenges as well. So during the initiation of the digital agriculture development in terms of roadmap, we began by having a blog where data, knowledge, and information is generated, and that is research. So research, again, has a national aspect, in international aspects like the CG Center, bilateral, multilateral, as well as regional universities, local research institutions as well. So that unit is one part. So when we move from value chain level towards an ecosystem level, that is an area where we can really exploit in terms of data and knowledge sharing. For that to happen, the trust I just said is very important, and data sharing policy is also very important. Sometimes institutions collect data and they just sit upon it. So if data generated through investment cannot be formulated into a business, or if you don't get return from your investment in terms of gathering data, then it's of no use. So that is very important. Then it's about formulating and packaging this data and knowledge to help farmers increase either productivity or income. So that again requires a link between research and extension advisory service providers. Then comes in the frontline actors. If these three segments of the business model or the business process is not linked, then everything we do might be interrupted. Then comes in what will be the role of private sector in these three blocks and along these processes, as well as in the digital ecosystem, is something that we need to define. An area of investment and support from the World Bank that I expect is investment in linking a private sector and a public investment. So a public and a private sector are not connected because this is service oriented, the other one is profit driven. So that interface, if really cultivated well, supported well, then we can turn the business opportunities. That's what I would like to add. Thank you, Mare.
Thank you very much, Dr. Under, for these thoughts. Inba, would you like to add a couple of words before I actually move on to some questions which are not flowing from the Q&A? Inba, over to you.
Yeah, I can only agree with all the comments that have been made. I think there is a real need for and a lot of opportunities for creatively partnering between public and private sector. And I think there's a lot about I fully agree about the data. And I think, there's so much data collection and data that a lot of public investments actually go into, and then that data is never shared, never really utilized to the extent that it can be. And I think we've got to have much stronger policies around that and ensuring that we're protecting the privacy. That's obviously very important, but also making sure that data is used and can be benefited and can get those returns back on them. I think in terms of the research, I think it's, and for sustainability, I think there are different comments on, investments that come in, they're there for 2 years and then they go away. I think part of that is also making sure that you've got that flow of researchers, that the universities are connected with the ministries, are connected with the private sectors, and so that you also have that continuity of capability and on the technology side and in supporting the requirements and the needs. Maybe I'll stop there because I think we're out of time, but there's a lot more I can say, but I fully agree with a lot of the comments that have been just made.
Well, hopefully this session can be a way to create some more, discussions and communication among different people in the audience or the panel. Parmesh, just a question from you from the Q&A. We've had questions about what are the requirements for the private sector partnerships with the World Bank, which private partnerships are eligible, and well, I think Jihei just mentioned a few of the ways that can be done, but maybe if you could say a few more words on the things we are thinking of at the World Bank and what your thoughts are on this. Thanks, over to you.
So I think it's a good question. Broadly, when we did our analytics for Africa in 2019, we found that there are almost 480 solutions across Africa which were scalable, basically, because which had already reached as some kind of a smaller level proof of concept. And I think what we have to do, some kind of diagnostic on a proof of concept, which you heard about the innovation challenges, which we do and all that to discover, because there's one part is that you can do a lot of analytics. The second part is you need people to come out and pitch their solutions to a wide range of stakeholders, and then we pick people out of that. So I would say the criteria are clearly that you have a solution which you have tested and tried on smaller scale, and you also have clearly both a technology and a business model to accompany that. If you have those two, then the discovery of the solution happens through a more transparent process. And once that is discovered, they become member of the platform which GA and Sriram both were describing. So the role of the World Bank is to provide the platform. And I want to just make one more point here, that the platforms have to be of reasonable scale. As Sri was talking, that they've reached 120,000. So we clearly had an aspiration to go to 1 billion farmers from the day one, so that any investment you do should become viable. Cost of acquisition per farmer, cost of providing products and services becomes much more viable for any provider to come in. So I would say that I think investing in an initial stage, which I think some kind of a patient investment in letting those solutions to happen. And we fixed a threshold of almost like a 10,000 farmers per innovator. So we would work with you in incubating and until you reach 10,000. And after that, your business model should take over basically there. So we are looking for people and startups which are not just interested in getting a grant, but are interested in doing a proof of concept on reasonable scale and then scaling it up on a large scale there. And then we invest in like the big data platform with Calro, which has really bought all the data from Kenyan research and digitized it. Then we have invested in the digital farmer registry, where data about 1.2 million farmers, as Sriram was saying, is available to any innovator who wants to come in, so that they don't have to acquire farmers from scratch. So how do you really, what is the risk perception of different people? And what do you do to change that risk perception? It is about digital registries, it's about data platform, it is about the initial platform to do the proof of concept. So these are enablers which one has to, World Bank invests in so that we can go to scale. Our aspiration is in Africa to reach 50 million farmers over the next 10 years. And we have to have a scale aspiration if we want to create systems. If we have all the time looking at smaller proof of concepts, we will never work on system-wide approaches there. So I feel that we are going to work that way in about 8 to 10 countries now. And we will announce that kind of a facility where we will invite innovators, not country by country, but we will invite innovators across the whole region to come and say which country they would like to work in, about scale they would like to work in, so that this happens not in a country by country way, but happens at a regional level as well. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Parmesh. And we're actually over time, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut our conversation here. But I believe that there's been a few exchanges, Sri, from your side, with people asking you about how to create trust with farmers. I engage anyone who would like to talk to you and then hear from your experience, to also maybe look into our webinars at the World Bank. We had a really amazing webinar with you, Sri, not that long ago, where you were really explaining about your model. I think there's a lot of information out there. Please contact our panelists if you're interested in hearing more from their experience. We have to close today, and I'm asked to mention that we have a feedback poll for this session on WUVA. It would take only 1 minute for you to fill it. So grateful if you can do it to know a bit more about what your thoughts were about this session. Looking forward to hearing from you. We don't know who you are, the audience, but hopefully we can be in touch. And I personally found this session very interesting and insightful and quite exciting about what the opportunities can be. I think there's a lot that can be done now. So it's very optimistic, I think. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a good day. Bye.